everyone. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio this week. Today, we're going to talk about how to start your fitting journey. So, we're going to cover why fitting can feel so overwhelming, and we're going to give you some easy steps, some easy process for jumping into fitting if you're new to fitting. I'm really excited to talk about this because I think this is something that a lot of people, some people struggle with, and a lot of people are just really, really interested in, especially when they're new to sewing. So, this is going to be fun to talk about. I think.
It will be.
I think. I think, and I hope.
So I'm going to start us off with our icebreaker for makers today. And my question is for you, Sari, what is the worst fitting garment that you've ever made?
All right, I've already talked about the worst fitting garment I've ever made on the show, which, to briefly recap, that was the time I made a bias cut dress when I was first learning to sew and decided to save fabric and not cut it on the bias. and it was just like a tube that I was squeezed into. It was awful. That was probably the worst fitting garment that I've ever made, but I've talked about that. I have another story about bad fit, which is when one of my dear friends got married, she had another friend of ours who was a designer make most of the bridesmaids' dresses, and I was a bridesmaid. But because I could sew, he made a pattern for me so that I can make my own dress and sent me the fabric and the pattern. And I did not know exactly, this was like it was say homemade, but it was a pattern made by him. It didn't have all the instructions or, all the things that would come with it, like a home sewing pattern. And I did not know what the intended fit was. So it had sort of a very fitted, like corsety type bodice and a longer, fuller skirt. And he was a corset maker also, like a really, really talented corset maker, really good at it. So I figured it was supposed to have a fit like a corset, like being really, really extremely tight. And so that is how I fitted it. And that was like the garment I made. But when I got to the wedding, everybody else's bodices were just like a bodice, like on, any dress. And mine was super, super tight. And so I was really, I felt really embarrassed because it was just like I could barely move in this thing. It was so tight. And, it was like pushing my boobs up, and it looked completely different from all the other bridesmaids. And it was all because it wasn't necessarily that I had sewn it incorrectly or chosen the wrong size. It was just that I did not understand what the intention of the garment was. I didn't have a photograph, I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. So that's my embarrassing story.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny. I used to make custom wedding dresses, and this one time we were working with this bride, and every single fitting she wore different shapewear, and I would make these dresses with my friend Rachel, and we were like, dude, you like have to like pick one and move. And she was like just really like, I look back, I feel bad because she was really like tormented and like warring with her body trying to like make it, a certain way with like, layers of Spanx and stuff. And at our last fitting, we're like, this is it. Okay. Like this dress was like very form fitting. We're like, you can't change your shapewear up on us again. Like it's just gonna be bad news bears. And then we show up to drop off the dress like a week later, and we go into like her bedroom to like help her get into it, and she has some whole different like shapewear ensemble on and a new bra. And she's like, oh, it's weird. It fits weird. I'm like, yeah, because your body is like contorting into a whole brand new shape. What the heck? Go get your other Spanx and bra and try it on again. Like, get with the program. Come on.
Yeah, that is sort of a sad comment, though. I feel like I feel like we've all been there at times. You're just trying to, especially in a high pressure situation like a wedding, everybody's gonna be looking at you. There's gonna be a million photos of you. I
Yeah.
feel for her.
Totally, totally. But we had to have this like stern moment. And I was like
Yeah.
22 at the time, and the bride was in her 60s. It was her first wedding, and she
Oh,
just was
wow.
like, I was just like wagging my finger at her. It's- I look back and I'm like, oh, poor
Yeah.
thing. And some like sassy 22-year-old had to like, you know, put her in her
Lecture
place.
you. Yeah, but I think if you want a well-fitting garment, you gotta figure out your underwear situation
You gotta figure it out, and you gotta know
because
the
no getting
intended
around it.
fit. Is that these are two really good lessons because
Yeah.
it's not really about, like, a pattern being bad or a bodies being bad, using air quotes. It's about, like, the things you can do to, like, not, war with your muslins and your clothing so much, know how it's
Mhm.
supposed to fit, wear the same bra every time. That's,
Yeah.
good starting points for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, they're basics, but a lot of people forget them. I'm
Mhm,
including both of us, I'm
mhm,
sure, at times.
totally, totally.
So we're talking about fit this month, as you guys may have noticed. Last week we talked about fit and about fit expectations. And the reason we're talking so much about fit is we've recently launched a new class called How to Fit with Confidence, and it has us just thinking a lot about fit. And so we wanted to share a little bit about that with you. Haley, do you want to talk a little bit about what's included in the class since you are the one teaching it?
Yeah, so it was like, it took us a long time to develop this because when Meg, my wonderful coworker, first approached me about teaching this class, she was like, "Let's do a class and let's do like, what do you think are like the 3 or 4 most like important um, fit adjustments to know?" And I was like, my brain like imploded at that question. I was like, "No, there's no such thing. It's different for everyone." So I kind of sat on it for a couple weeks, and then I had this like light bulb moment. I'm going to teach people how to fit the way that I learned how to fit. And that is kind of like removing all the nomenclature of like full seat adjustment, full tummy adjustment, broad shoulder adjustment, all of that, and starting with a muslin and fitting what you see. If you've ever taken like a drawing or painting class, you've probably been told draw what you see. Um,
Mhm.
most people, a lot of times, people get like really caught up in like what they think something should look like instead of just like drawing what they see. And I think the same goes
Mm.
for when you're fitting a garment. You get caught up in your judgment of like, "Oh no, my tummy is too big," or all this stuff
Mhm.
instead of just fitting what you see. So it all really centers
Wow.
around making a muslin and learning how to read the wrinkles, learning how to pin or slash your muslin to remove those wrinkles, and then taking that and transferring it to flat pattern making. And so it's really like X
Mhm.
and Y axis kind of oriented. It removes a lot of body judgment from the process, and I'm really excited about it. I think it turned out really cool, and so I'm like really just like pleased to share it with everyone.
That's such a wonderful perspective. It reminds me of, the book have you read excuse me. Have you read the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain?
Uh huh.
I don't know if I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but, if you haven't read that book, it's by Betty Edwards, and um it's a method of learning how to draw, and she
Mhm.
talks a lot about drawing what you see,
Mhm.
physically in front of you and trying to remove some of the tricks that your brain plays when it starts labeling things. And she talks about, when you give something a label, like you're trying to draw a face and you give something a label like a nose, and your brain tries to create kind of a shorthand for a nose when you're
Mhm.
drawing. But if you take away that that naming and you just look at the lines and the shapes and the shades that are in front of you, and you can just transfer that onto paper, then you can create a much more realistic drawing. And it's so interesting to think about that in terms of fitting too. If you can take away the names of what you're doing and the all the layers of judgment and the layers of um, assumptions that you've piled on that either that part of your body or whatever you're looking at, then you can get a much more realistic picture of how to manipulate something in space to create another shape, which is so interesting.
Yeah, it just seems like the most concise way to pack in a lot of methods and ideas on how to get a good fit because, a lot of the times what it comes down to is needing more width, needing more length, or needing more fullness kind of in one concentrated area. Um, and
Mhm.
you can need more fullness in your tummy. You can need more fullness in your bum. You can need more fullness in your bust, or the opposite. You can need less of all of those things. And so instead of being like, the most important thing is a full bust adjustment, it's like, oh no, it's like adding or reducing fullness in general. And here's how you can do that and transfer it to like, a lot of different places in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really great way of looking at it. And I think I also like the fact that this class covers really how to think about fit and how you can get started with fit and learn some of these core skills that you can transfer to different, because there's so many different ways you can fit a garment and so many different ways you can apply basic fitting lessons. And I really feel like that's where a lot of people get stuck is not not understanding the fundamentals, but also not having a process for themselves
Mhm.
that they can follow. It feels like you're kind of taking a shot in the dark sometimes if you don't have your own process that you can follow and some core principles you can go back to.
Totally. So I really encourage you all to, if you're struggling with fit, if you really need a process, come join me in this class and hopefully I can help you kind of overcome all of those kind of like feelings and you'll leave feeling amazing.
Yeah. You should always leave your sewing feeling amazing.
Yeah. Number one
If
tip in
possible.
life. Yeah.
You won't always, but
You won't. It's
it's a good
unrealistic.
goal. It's a good
Totally
intention.
unrealistic.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit before we get into some of the tips that we have. Um, maybe why do you think that fit is so intimidating, and how do you think we can overcome that intimidation factor?
Um, I think it kind of like circles back to what we were just talking about is not having a framework to approach it. And just like a order of
Mhm.
operations. I think like, whenever I'm like spiraling in my work or like a project feels really big, what I go and I do is I like write down like, okay, what's the first thing I need to do to get started? Okay, what do I do after that? And after that? And having this order of operations to um, work off of is really important. And I think a lot of people don't even know where to begin.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think another thing that many people struggle with is the difficulty of manipulating like these three-dimensional puzzles because
Hmm.
the body is quite complex,
Yeah,
especially um, I think especially um, if you have a lot of curves, it becomes even more complex. And so that fact, I think, combined with the fact that we don't really learn how to do this type of thing in school, for example,
hmm,
I don't think we do a lot of work with our hands, first of all, and I don't think we do a lot of work with three-dimensional shapes and kind of spatial awareness and developing our spatial skills. And so, more and more, those kinds of things are going by the wayside. Things like, home ec classes and shop classes in schools. We're not really taught how to do this, and how to think about these things. And so I think approaching these complex puzzles without any kind of background in that process can be really overwhelming for our brains.
Mhm.
And just a difficult thing to perceive and a difficult thing to even know where to begin with. So I think having, like you're saying, having a process is really helpful for this, just because it is a skill. It's something that, not just the skill of fitting and knowing how to make fit adjustments and things, but really the skill of being able to look at a three-dimensional object and determine how you can manipulate it to change it into a different three-dimensional shape is a skill that you can develop over time.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of these like skill sets that kind of like overlap, like a soft skill and like a hard skill, like a creative part of sewing, and then there's the more like tactical part. Um, you need to you start with your framework, and then once you build your skill set and your confidence, then you can kind of like, you know, go off the beaten path and forge your own way and figure it out as you go. But starting with a framework, like if you're taking a writing class, you're gonna like start with an outline and do all of these things. And then
Mhm,
if you're a more seasoned writer, maybe you at one point feel more comfortable just like jumping in and going for it. Um,
mhm.
but most people don't start that way and don't expect yourself to start that way.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to share some tips that we have, and these are inspired by our fitting journal, which you can actually download for free. You don't have to be a Seamwork member. You can get this fitting journal for free, and this is going to be a really, really helpful tool for you as you get more and more into fitting, whether you're brand new to it or whether you've been doing it for years. I think it'll be helpful for you. We'll talk a little bit about the kinds of ways you can use it as we go through these tips. But we'll put a link to that in the show notes, and you can just follow that link and get your own fitting journal that you can use with any project in the future. And so it's really designed to help you to look at your muslins and to analyze them in a really straightforward way. So go and get that fitting journal. Again, we'll put a link down below in the show notes. And so our first tip from the fitting journal is to take impeccable measurements. And and Haley, when you wrote this tip, you wrote, "Don't lie." Like, don't be a liar to yourself. Which I think is so funny. Please don't lie. Don't lie to me or to anyone else. But I think you do have to be honest with yourself and set aside the judgment you have around measurements, and
Mhm.
that can be really hard for a lot of us, I think.
Mhm.
Um, I struggle with that for sure still, I think, especially if, you do have any kind most of us have some sort of body image issue, I think.
Mhm.
Most of us, that's something, whether no matter where you are on your journey, it's probably something you've struggled with at some point in your life.
Mhm.
Um, and I think measurements, being able to look at measurements as just data
Mhm.
and numbers is a really powerful way of working through that, and coming to terms with reality is what it is, and you're making clothes to fit that reality rather than trying to conform your body to fit what you think it should be.
Yeah. And I think like, I think a lot of us think like, "Oh, well, I'm not sucking it in. It's accurate." I think what a lot of people tend to do when they try on garments, when they try on their like a garment or a muslin, or when they take their measurements, is they stand in this like very like rigid, straight way that's not
Mhm.
your natural posture. So even if you aren't sucking it in, if you're standing in your unnatural state, it's not going to tell you the truth. So really, like, relax, breathe, you know, stand how you normally stand and take those measurements. Um, it's not just about like, oh well, I'm not sucking it in; it must be accurate.
Yeah, and, when we have fit models in, we have them move around, see
Hmm.
how see how things work. You might have them walk or sit and make
Mhm.
sure that everything, is still comfortable and fits well in all the natural normal positions you're going to be going throughout your day. So that's another way to kind of look at
Mhm.
fit as you're going through this process.
Mhm.
So that's the first one. And then the second tip is not to forget about ease. It can be really easy to forget that you need ease in your clothing. And if you're not familiar with that term, ease is basically the difference in measurement between your body and the garment. So it's the space between your body and the garment. And different types of garments are going to have different amounts of ease, and there's different ease in different areas of the garment. So, for example, if you're making something that has, maybe like a fit and flare dress, something like that, there's going to be less ease at the waist, there's going to be more ease at the hips. So don't forget about ease and the fact that you need it. You can look at the finished measurement charts on a garment and see what the actual measurement of the garment is going to be when you make that particular size. And
Mhm.
that'll help you determine if it's going to have the amount of ease that you need, if there's the difference that you need between your body measurement and the garment measurement in that area. And we mentioned this in our last episode, but you can take a garment that you already have that fits you well to determine approximately how much ease you actually want. So that's a really good way of going about it. We mentioned that, outerwear is going to have more ease, for example, so that you can move around easily and you can wear things under it. Something like a pair of, fitted trousers, they're going to have less ease. So it's helpful to think about the type of garment and look at something that you already own to help you figure out how much ease you need. But the finished garment measurement chart that you have with your pattern is going to be really, really helpful for discovering whether this garment is going to fit you in the size that you've chosen.
Mhm.
So, the next tip is to make a muslin. So, a muslin is basically a test garment that you make in, well, typically a muslin fabric. That's kind of the traditional thing. You can use other fabrics. You often want to use something that's similar to the fabric you're going to make your actual garment out of. So if you're going to make, something that's in a really heavy fabric, you might want to use a heavier fabric for your test garment. If you're going to make something in a very light fabric, you might want to use something more similar to that. But usually it's, a cheaper fabric, cheaper version of your final fabric, just so you can test the fit. And making a muslin is really helpful in seeing what the actual garment is going to look like on your particular body and doing all those things we just mentioned, moving around in it, kind of taking a look at how things move with your body, whether you're having, um, whether you have your intended fit in the areas that you want to have it, whether you have enough ease in the areas that you anticipated having enough ease in, all of those things. Making a test garment or a muslin is really, really key in getting the fit that you want. I'm curious, Haley, how often would you say that you make a muslin when you're sewing something new for yourself?
Mm,
If it's a pattern you haven't used before.
it's a pattern I haven't used before. Um, well, it's different because I've been sewing for a long time, so I can look at the shape of a pattern and,
Mhm,
oftentimes I can kind of assess based on that, um, what I need to do, just, like, based on, like, the
mhm,
shapes that I'm seeing and the garment measurement charts. But I would say when I first started sewing for myself, and I wasn't as, like, intimately acquainted with my body and the 2D shapes that fit it, I would say probably, like,
mhm.
at 2 out of every 3 projects, like,
Mm.
realistically.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that I make muslins if it's a particular type of garment where the fit is very important. So if I'm making pants,
Mhm,
usually, unless they're, a real loose fitting elastic waist sort of deal, I'll often make a muslin. Or if it's, for example, a blazer,
mhm,
something that I'm gonna be investing quite a bit of time into making, and I really want to last a long time and have the fit is very important to me, then that's when I turn to muslins and, really take the time to make sure I'm getting the result that I want in the end. And
mhm,
if I'm using an expensive fabric, that's another time when I wanna make sure that I'm I'm
Oh,
getting
yeah.
exactly what I want out of that fabric.
Oh, yeah, and if I don't make a muslin and it doesn't fit, then I, like, fully just blame myself. I'm like, "Well, I was being lazy, and I shouldn't have done that."
And some people like to make wearable muslins where it's
Mhm,
something it's they make it in a fabric where they think, as long as the fit is decent on this muslin, I can wear it. So that's
mhm.
another way that you can, if you feel like making muslins takes a lot of time, that's another way you can get a little bit more use out of them.
I do that with knits a lot. I'll
Mhm.
just, like, be sure to take some, like, really good measurements before and, like, make if I'm making leggings, like, make sure, like, okay, the rise and the length, like, kinda lines up with a pair of leggings I like. And then I'll just go for it
Yeah.
and call it a wearable
Mhm.
muslin.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with knits, because you need to use a fabric that's similar, because knits have, there's different stretch, there's different
Right.
recovery, there's all different kinds of things that you have to consider with the fabric itself. So I think that's a good point. So our next tip is so once you have your muslin and you've got this kind of test garment, focus on the top three things that you want to improve about the garment. So don't just, look at it and try and make it, a huge list of things that you want to change because you can't make those changes all at once. You'll often have cascading effects. So if you make a change in one area, it might affect other areas. So to start your diagnosis, just look at the top three things that you're noticing when you look at it and focus on those first. And then, Haley, would you advise, focusing on one of those things at a time as you're going through your fitting process, or what would you, what would you say to people to go from there?
I think it really depends on what you're seeing. I'm gonna use like a there. I don't think I'm giving away too many secrets. We're developing a jacket right now, and we've been fitting it for like a couple months now. And lots of times we've been fussing a lot with the shoulder and the bust shape, and you know kind of diagnosing, well, we're seeing a lot of pulling between the bust point and the shoulder. And I'm also seeing that it's hiking up at the front hem. Well, if we release
Mhm.
some of that vertical tension between the bust and the shoulder to alleviate the pulling, it's going to create more length. That might release the hem so that it's not hiking up so much. So try and really use your
Mhm.
critical thinking skills of like, from the top down, like what are you really seeing? Um, I would say the number of things to focus on would really depend on the severity of the issue. If you're like
Mhm.
this shoulder and sleeve situation is really like problematic on my particular body's shape, then I would say focus on that. Just get that right and then see where you land with your next muslin. But if you're just seeing like, oh, I just need a little extra room in the bicep and a little extra length, then go for it. But just be more cautious if you
Yeah.
think that they might be related.
Mhm. That's a good tip. I think recognizing whether they might be related issues or not. If it's just, "Oh, this I would like the sleeve length to be longer. It's not hitting me at the right, you know, part on my wrist," then that's different from maybe a bust issue, and they're not likely to interfere with each other. They could, but
Exactly.
that's where critical thinking comes in.
Yeah, totally. And that's definitely something that is a muscle that you'll have to develop. You're not going to learn it overnight. And there is a little bit of trial and error. And I know that's a really frustrating part of fitting, but it's also really
Mhm.
worthwhile. And it gets easier
Mhm.
every time.
Yeah. And then the next tip we have is to identify your wrinkles. All right, so wrinkles are a really good indication that there's something that you might want to focus on. And there are different types of wrinkles. There are wrinkles that come from something being too loose in a certain area, maybe having too much ease in a certain area, or maybe being too tight. That can also cause wrinkling. So if you look at our fitting journal, we have a cheat sheet that can help you to identify those wrinkles and work through that. So wrinkles are definitely one of the diagnostic tools that you'll
Mhm.
use in fitting. And then our next tip is to think in those X and Y axes that Haley mentioned earlier. So instead of trying to make a judgment about, oh, well, this is my bust is too big, or, this is, I need this type of adjustment or that type of adjustment, really try and think in terms of actual space. So it's kind of goes back to that drawing on the right side of the brain that I mentioned earlier. So think about what you're actually seeing with your eyes and what you're actually feeling with your hands in order to diagnose the problem and make some changes. And that can be a really challenging shift for a lot of us, don't you think,
Mhm.
Haley? I guess you're
Oh,
thinking in
yeah.
the XY and Z axes because it's
Yeah, I
three
guess
dimensional.
so,
It's
huh?
three axes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and then you're translating that to a two-dimensional thing. So it's like it's very layered, and I think that that's why e not having these unrealistic expectations of yourself that you're gonna get the most impeccably fitting pants and just with no muslin or one muslin. It's just, you know,
Mhm.
n not gonna happen. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter how, like, beautifully drafted the pattern is. It's all based on something that is, typical, and
Yeah.
not very many of us are typical.
Mhm. And then our next tip is to really deeply analyze your muslin. So don't just rush through it and look for the wrinkles and, I think it can be really tempting to just quickly fix it and move on to the next version.
Mhm,
But if you really take some time and look at your muslin closely and really think about how the shape is being created through the fabric, that can save you a lot of time in the end because you're not just whipping through different iterations, fixing this thing, fixing that thing, going back to the drawing board, but really
mhm,
stopping to think critically about it. And I think, asking for help with this, I think we see a lot of this on the community. If you post pictures there, people can help you with that. If you want to really get some input on as you kind of think deeply about it. And then the fitting journal sheet that we have in in our fitting journal, I think the fitting journal can really help with us as well because we've got a little cheat sheet there to help you.
I
So,
I think something that can help here too is taking photos, or
mm,
videos, or even like drawing over your photos to like identify, oh, tight horizontal wrinkles here or loose vertical wrinkles there. So you're really like, in some ways, kind of like disembodying the garment and just isolating um, the wrinkles so you can just focus on that and not, your feelings about your body. I think sometimes it can be kind of good to like separate it in a way to be more objective.
yeah, yeah. And then our final tip is to look for patterns in the way things fit. So, keeping a fit journal over time can be really, really helpful for that. And again, you can download ours at the link below. But keeping a journal and looking at what's happening over and over, what are you noticing? Where are the
Mhm,
areas that feel comfortable or less comfortable? Um, so, in the last episode, I talked about how it took me a while to figure out that I could shorten all my bodices because I have a shorter torso than the average for my height. So, and that took me a while to figure out, but noticing that pattern that every single dress I would make, the waist was not sitting in the right place and I was getting these bulges really helped me to recognize, well, this is just something that I can change whenever I make something that has this type of shape. And
mhm,
so I think really noticing those patterns for yourself is super, super valuable and can
mhm,
cut down on a lot of time spent fitting garments individually
totally.
if you know what to look for.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think I think that might be the most important tip. Like, I think that might be the
it
most helpful
is.
out of all of these.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of like circles back to what I was saying is I don't make as many muslins now because now I kind of know like the things that I need to watch out for when I'm making
Mhm.
something. I know how to take those measurements. So rise is always an issue for me. I have like a big bum and I have a tummy, and so I need some extra fabric to navigate around those curves. So I know what I need for a front rise and what I need for a back rise, and I just measure it before I cut my pattern out. And it really mitigates a lot of the issues that I would have otherwise seen in my first muslin or even first iteration of a garment. So if you can find those patterns and connect those dots and start documenting it now so you can see those, you'll be so much further along in your fitting journey in 1 year from now.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So
Okay,
I think that's all of our tips for today.
I think it is. I'm going to recap a little bit because we went over so much. So, just to remind you, all of these tips are inspired by our fitting journal, which is free to everyone. You don't even have to be a member. We'll drop a link in the show notes so you can go check that out and download it for yourself. But here are our top tips: take impeccable measurements, be realistic, don't lie to yourself, stand naturally, and just, it's just data. It's not there to pass judgment. It's just for a formula. Don't
Yeah.
forget about ease. Make sure you're looking at your finished measurement chart, comparing that to your body measurement chart, and making sure that you have an amount of ease in the garment that's going to allow you to be comfortable and allow you to move. Make a muslin. Don't skip it. Um, Especially if you're working with special fabric, or it's a complex garment like a pair of pants or an amazing blazer. Just make the muslin. I don't think you'll regret it. Once you make your muslin, make sure to focus on no more than like 3 things that you want to improve about the garment. Pattern changes have a cascade effect. And if you go um, too wild and make 10 changes to your garment, you might find that your next muslin is like a little wacky. So just beware. Identify your wrinkles and learn what the different wrinkles mean. Our fitting journal has a cheat sheet for this that is really helpful. And what that helps you do is to think about your garment in the X, Y, and as we discovered moments ago, Z axes. Um, So thinking about in terms of like how much width or length or fullness you need and kind of getting out of your head about like the nomenclature of different kinds of adjustments can sometimes be really helpful. Make sure to really deeply analyze your muslin, walk around in it, sit down in it, take some pictures, take some videos, um, and document what you see in your fitting journal. This can be really helpful um, exercise to kind of um, analyze the garment itself and not your body. See how it's functioning, how it's moving, and go beyond what you think you know about it and really dive into what you see and what you feel. And then, last but not least, probably our most important tip is to look for patterns in the way that things fit and document them. Um, I'm here to tell you that you will see patterns in what's going on with your clothing. And this is going to help you to, eventually, maybe someday, skip a muslin or two and save yourself a lot of grief in the fitting process.
Mhm.
So, those are our top tips for you today. Again, be sure to download the Fit Journal. It's a really, really awesome resource. And if you need even more guidance in fitting and want to check out a class with me, be sure to check out How to Fit with Confidence over in the CMART classroom. It is just kind of the first kickoff of our brand new um, fit series that will be featured in the classroom. And we're really beefing up the fit content so that we can remove those obstacles and feel really good about the clothes that we make.
Yes. We should all feel good about what we're making.
Yes, definitely. Well, if you liked this episode, be sure to leave us a review. Sarah and I, we super appreciate it. We read every single one, and it also helps us know what you like. or I don't know, maybe what you don't like. And it also helps other people to find Seamwork Radio so that they can hopefully enjoy it too. So be sure to leave a review.
Yeah, that we are super appreciative of all the people who have left us reviews. It really helps, and with the algorithms on these podcast platforms, it does help people to find the show. So thank you so much.
Totally. We get so excited if we see like someone shout us out on Instagram. We like screenshot it and send it to each
Yeah,
other.
we share it.
Look! Yay!
People like it.
We're not just like shouting out into the void.
So thank you guys so much, and we will talk to you next week.
See ya.